Stephen Carter here. Welcome to the Energy Healing Network show. This show is part of the Creating Inner Harmony project. A question: have you ever wondered how a medical intuitive goes about identifying what underlying issues are affecting emotional and physical well-being and how those issues can be resolved? If you have ever wondered, well, you are in the right place. We'll be talking with medical intuitive Sue Hannibal. She's been doing medical intuition work for more than 20 years. You're going to learn how she's helped thousands of people and how you can enhance your own intuitive awareness. You're going to want to stay tuned to the very end. Sue is going to share how you can get a special guide she's prepared to help you tap into your own intuition and recognize the true meanings behind metaphorical language to help yourself and others. Sue is an intuitive behaviorist, which is her brand of medical intuition. She's a holistic therapist. She has, as I say, done work for more than 20 years. She specializes in civilian, first responder, military trauma, panic, phobias, dissociation. She's a member of the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology, the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress, the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine, and the American Society of Evidence-Based Policing. She's an expert emotional freedom techniques practitioner. She uses other energy psychology and other energy medicine methods to help clients. Her book, Spiritual Compass, Practical Strategies for When You Feel Lost, Alone, and God Seems Far Away, is a guide to developing the emotional healing, spiritual resilience, and intuitive navigation skills you, I, and everyone need in this increasingly stressful world. She can be reached on Facebook or through her website, SueHannibal.com. And Sue, let's bring Sue on. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Hi, Steve.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm glad you're joining us.
Thank you.
Sue, I want to get right into a conversation about exactly what is intuitive medical intuition and your brand of intuitive behavior. No, let me correct that. What is medical intuition and how does that relate to your brand of intuitive behaviorist? What does a medical intuitive do and what kind of conditions bring people to seek you out for help?
Okay. Medical intuition is a clairvoyant skill. Some people call it a gift. Some people have a combination of both. It is an ability to read energy in a particularly specific diagnostic way. So some medical intuitives specialize in reading the body, and some of them can see into the cell tissue. They can see cancer and tumors and things like that. I never really specialized in the body. I can do a rudimentary physical scan if I need to, but I pretty much specialize in the emotional issues, which is why we're going to talk today about somatization and some of the things that are under the radar, under the iceberg waterline, so to speak. So people come to medical intuitives when, in my experience, they've been everywhere and done everything and they can't heal. They've been through the medical toolbox with blood tests and x-rays and imaging scans and things like that. And a lot of physicians, their toolbox is just limited when you get into the energy realms or dissociation. So they turn the person inside out and they say there's nothing wrong with you. And sometimes they say, well, it's all in your mind, and they send them to a psychiatrist. They put them on meds, psych meds, So I get a lot of those people. And then I get a lot of people that their trauma is somaticized, which means the energetic imprint of trauma morphs or migrates into the body. So that would be things like some cases of irritable bowel syndrome. They call it IBS. A lot of skin conditions I have found are trauma-based, eczema, psoriasis, and there's a metaphor to some of this that we'll get into in a minute when we start talking about metaphor language. I teach metaphor language as medical intuition in manual mode. And I want to be able to give people that skill so they can start learning to read their own body. The language of the body-mind appears to be metaphorical because we all say stuff. So that's a skill set that people can sort of tune into because they already know it. They just don't recognize what they're saying has maybe a physical or emotional component to it.
Somatization.
Somatization, yes.
Somatization, easy for you to say. Regarding that, what are the aspects of somatization that you see most often in the clients that physicians and psychiatrists refer to you?
Mm-hmm. Can you put up the diagram of the iceberg so they can see what we're talking about here?
I can indeed.
Thank you. I'm using the imagery of an iceberg because first of all, everybody knows what an iceberg is. And sometimes the most dangerous part, metaphorically speaking, is under the waterline. So we have somatization above the waterline, which is the physical illness, the emotional patterns, the triggers. Some people are triggered by things and they go into a panic attack, or they have a phobia, or they have anxiety or something. And someone may be walking with them when they get triggered and they're freaking out, and the person that is with them doesn't have that trigger that might be under the waterline. And they're like, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? Well, this is why. So there's a lot of things that are in the above the waterline that we go to a therapist or a physician for, but their training, except maybe some people in ASEP, our Energy Psychology Association, their training in their toolbox doesn't allow them to connect those dots to what's below the waterline. So I'm specializing in teaching that right now and writing another book about it. So let's go to the one at 1 o'clock there, panic attack. Panic attacks are in two categories. They used to call it uncued, which basically means no known cause. Those are the most terrifying because when they happen, they can happen in going to the mailbox, waking up in the morning, driving to work. You never know. And that is terrifying. The other ones are cued or associated with something. And those are a little bit easier to manage, as painful and disruptive as they are, because you have something to avoid. If you have a problem with heights, don't climb a ladder. But they're still life limiting. So we want to be able to metaphorically diagnose what is going on with those and release those. So if you want to hear a couple of case histories about panic attacks, I have some of those. The one in my book that is very fascinating, and it was also the subject of a Fayetteville Observer, North Carolina, has to do with an Army officer. My husband is a retired Army officer, so we were in North Carolina near Fort Bragg at this time. And he came to see me because he had a panic disorder uncued or unassociated for 8 years. And he'd been everywhere and done everything. And so, he's in the category of going to a medical intuitive, even though he really wasn't certain what that was. So I didn't do an intuitive scan on him. I just listened. And I asked him a couple of very important questions. One is, what goes through your mind? They call it ideation. What goes through your mind when you have this panic? And he said, I'm dying, I'm suffocating, and the whole world is dying. So I thought, okay, I'm listening to that. I'm kind of running things through my mind. And then I said, what about any repetitive dreams? Now, the repetitive dream thing is really important here in two ways. One is dream imagery is metaphorical, and we're going to get into the metaphor language. And the repetitive dreams, the dreams are the expression of the subconscious. Anybody can look up dream interpretation on the net, and you'll get all this information about what dream imagery or symbolism is like. So he had repetitive dreams of being trapped in a small space and feeling suffocated, a toy box, a suitcase. And I just got a feeling that this has to do with birth. And I asked him if he knew what his birth was like, and he said he didn't. So we called his mother, and he had been 3 days actually, 3 days of labor with that. And finally they did a forceps delivery. And so that birth trauma imprint of those 3 days of struggling to survive, the cord around his neck and whatever else was going on chemically and medically, imprinted into uncued panic attacks that tormented him for most of his life. And we were able to undo that in one session because we were able to pinpoint that it was a birth issue, heal that, and his panic attacks went away. So it's a very important tool to be able to look at things metaphorically and see what the body is trying to tell us, either in symptoms or in dream imagery.
Any other case examples that you could share with us?
There was one that was very interesting, and it had to do with chronic psoriasis. This person was referred to me by a licensed clinical social worker, and he had a horrific trauma history, and she didn't know how to get him to the point where his skin would heal. We agreed that it was somaticized, but she couldn't figure it out. So during our first session, he was able to let me go into his childhood only to a point. He wouldn't let me go all the way where I thought I needed to go, but we were able to do some work. And the psoriasis receded, but it didn't go away. So a year later, he shows up, he's covered with it. And I said, let me see. So he pulled up his shirt, I looked at his back, and I said, metaphorically, those look like angry, weeping sores. And he said, if you can't get this healed for me, I'm going to kill myself. I've never felt comfortable in my own skin. And I said, stop. What did you just say? So we connected those dots, and he was in apparently enough torment that he let me take him into the deepest part of his childhood trauma that he was afraid to go to before. And his ACEs score, ACEs is Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's a 1 to 10 assessment of childhood trauma. I think his ACE score was about an 8. But we were able to heal the part of him, the age of him that was dissociated, which means checked out of present time, that was causing the angry, weeping sores, the grief, the anger of what had happened to him that was manifesting in his body. So 12 hours after that session, the itching stopped, he reported to me. And then 2 weeks later, all the sores healed. And there was no scarring either, and it was bad. So that's the kind of like the mystery in a way of the body-mind connection and what really we can do if we understand and know how to connect those dots. Dreams are very, very important. And there's probably, I taught a workshop on metaphor language, and I researched books on Amazon. I stopped at 100 books about using metaphor language in psychotherapy. So it's not a woo-woo tool. It's part of the clinical explanation for some of these things, that metaphor language is important.
Amazing.
Thank you.
An amazing case. Kept 2 cases. How about four-legged? cases. Do you
Four-legged cases. Have had a few of those.
tell us about your work with animals, and
Yeah.
how do you go about, since the animals aren't giving us metaphorical speech, at least
Or dreams.
most of us can't understand it.
Right.
How do you go about determining what's going on for an animal, and how do you help them?
Mm-hmm. Well, we teach this in the energy psychology and in the EFT. EFT is acupressure tapping on points in the acupuncture system to release the imprinted trauma in the brain, in the limbic brain, and in the body, right at the body-mind connection we're working. So when you're treating somebody that is has no language, so a baby or a toddler, someone who might have dementia, an animal, someone in a coma, it's possible to do that surrogately. So what you do when you're treating someone surrogately or an animal, you bring up in your mind what they must be going through, and you tap as if you're them. So there's been a number of cases. I'll tell you a quick one first. It had to do with a cat. A friend of mine had two cats. One would not go in the basement where the litter boxes were, insisted on having it somewhere else. So this friend of mine is going down the basement and upstairs with these two litter boxes. And so I was visiting her and I said, well, I'll just tap for it. The cat wasn't around that wouldn't go in the basement. But I just said, on the side of the hand, this is a tap. I said, even though I'm not going in that basement, I don't like basements. Something bad happened to me in the basement. It's dark. I don't like the stairs. I am not going down there. And I just kind of talked and tapped about, I'm not going in the basement. I hate basements. They're scary. I don't know what's going to happen down there and what that must be going on in the cat's mind. And so my friend is laughing at me and I'm like, fine, just let me do this. So a couple of weeks later, she calls me and she says, the cats, both of them, are in the basement using the litter box. What did you do? I'm like, well, you saw what I did. It's possible to adjust someone's energy field, hopefully with their consent. I mean, I have to get consent, of course, from an animal, but surrogate work and with intention, with healing intention, does work. The other one was a pit bull that had been used as a bait dog, as a puppy. So we're talking the animal equivalent of the ACEs, the trauma score. So this dog, I was a little bit afraid of the dog, even though my friend was there. So I had her put the thing on his face, but I was sitting on the couch and she was next to me at the other end, and the dog was across from us on a chair. So I just started tapping and talking about what it must have been like to be a bait dog. I can't protect myself. I'm tied up, I'm trapped, I'm being attacked, it hurts. And I just rocked and rolled with that. So I'm watching the dog. About a minute into it, he gets off the chair and he goes to the other chair that's across from where he was, boots a cat off of that chair, gets on that chair. And I keep tapping and we're both watching. And then about another 30 seconds to a minute, he comes across the floor and he gets at the edge of the couch. And then I'm still tapping and talking about what it must have been like to be tortured that way and helpless and overwhelmed and everything I could think of, and the pain. Then he comes across the couch onto the owner's lap, and then he's crawling and he's on my lap. And I'm freaking out because he's sensitive to hands. He'll only let anybody touch him except her. But I just kept tapping myself and he just laid on my lap. And she told me later he was a different dog. So I was able to tune in and I guess down-regulate his limbic system like you do with a person and release some of the trauma of what happened to him when he was a little helpless puppy. That was pretty cool.
Absolutely amazing stories, both two-legged and for four-legged folks.
Energy is energy, right, Steve?
Energy is energy. I'd like to turn attention to your book. Mm-hmm. It's an amazing read. Spiritual compass, practical strategies for when you feel lost, alone, and God seems far away. I think we've all had the dark night of our souls from time to time, and indeed you speak to that. How did you get the idea to write this book? What was the genesis that led you to create this magnificent piece of work?
Thank you. Well, it's my second book. My first book was in another area, and it's out of print. It was in an automotive. I call it the automotive lifetime that I had before becoming a healer. I think that it was the channeled essays. There were so many that were in the realm of what I would call timeless wisdom. They are one size fits all spiritual guidance, not to be confused with religion or dogma or anything other holy books. You know, there's no designation between spiritual truth, universal law, and wisdom versus dogma or the rules and regs of religions. So that's one thing, is that I thought it was a one size fits all. And there were so many aspects of memories and particular clients that I had worked with that seemed to be related to the wisdom in some of those. So I got the idea to just publish these channelings. There's 38 of them in the book, which is only a small version of all of them I've done over the years, but I picked through them very carefully to get that broad spectrum wisdom. And then I put practical strategies and practical wisdom after each one to ground it, and used case histories and different things from my own life and from clients. So I thought it was an important tool to let people read those, apply them to their own lives. Maybe it would answer some spiritual questions. It answered a lot of my own questions when I would ask. Like one of them was about manifesting. There's a lot of woo-woo affirmations and people talking about manifesting and just, you know, keep repeating it and you'll get your wish or something. It's quite a bit of a deeper dive than that. And one of the essays that really impressed me enough to put it in the book was, I thought I was praying, but I was really whining about something. And my guidance said, well, if you were to pour cement, you have to have a very level surface. You have to have the form, and then you pour the wet cement in there and you wait for it to harden. But if you take away the form, it's just going to spill out and you're not going to have anything. So when you're asking for a prayer or an intention to be met, it's just like ordering something at Amazon. You pick out what you want, you click the thing and you pay and you wait for it to be delivered, and it'll be delivered. You don't call customer service and bug them, you know, when is it coming? Is it coming? You just wait and it will come. So they were teaching me the process of manifestation and prayer and belief in that little vignette. And there's a lot of little things, the little bits of wisdom sprinkled through that book. And then in part two, and I had to think about this very carefully, which is basically, how far do I want to stick my personal and professional neck out to talk about things that happened, because I work on outcome. I mean, I respect research and research is important, but outcome is no harm is where I want to live. And there's two reasons for a study. A, does it work? And B, does it harm? So I'm kind of in the middle of some of that when I'm working with someone, but it's primarily outcome that I'm looking for. So I just started thinking about what's under the radar. So many people that have come to me. In fact, one was a man, and he said, I'm so desperate, I'll even come to somebody like you. When I stopped laughing, I said, well, give me a minute. All right, just let me, And that was a case of hoarding. And it was from a past life. And so getting back to the part two of the book, I had to decide whether I want to put this in. And ultimately, I decided to put it in because I thought it was important for people to see, and they can decide on their own what they want to do about that. There's a ton of research. But yeah, it's been quite a mystical, spiritual, psychological adventure with some of these cases. And there's a number of them that I just couldn't put in the book, but those might surface some other time.
Great. I want to share here. Let me bring this up. Your reviews on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
I've personally reviewed many books on Amazon. People have asked me to read and review, and I can't recall any author that I've worked with that has had the quality and the number of reviews that you have had here. And I'd just like to take a minute to look at a couple of these reviews, and this is most recent, as of February 7th. Once a year, read at minimum. Incredibly insightful and thought-provoking book. Insightful, the right thing at the right time, helped me out of a dark place. Everyone should read. And it goes on and on and on. You have 49 reviews, and some of those reviews, or at least one, I believe we were talking that the person who was involved as the spouse for one of your clients actually left a review after reading the book. Can you share a little bit about that?
Are you talking about the phantom limb pain case?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it was the niece of the man who was brought to me for treatment. Phantom limb pain is, of course, from an amputation. It's chronic, sometimes very debilitating pain in the energy field. And I don't know if doctors connect that dot, but if your limb is cut off, let's say at the knee, the pain that the person feels is in the field of the limb that is no longer there. They'll feel pain in their foot, their etheric ankle, whatever. So what I realized about that was that it was definitely an energy field, but I had never done anything with it. So she brought him, and he, at the time he was in his 70s, I found out he recently died like a year or two ago, but she brought him and I put him on the massage table. Well, first of all, what we did was EFT. I said, tell me what happened, how you lost your leg. He came from between two parked cars and was hit by a car, and it took his leg off below the knee. So we did EFT on the accident, the pain, how angry he was at the other driver, angry at himself because he didn't look before he went in the street, the whole thing, and the doctors and all of that. We did that first. And then I put him on the massage table, and his niece, we were here at my house. I have a 2-story house with a loft. His niece went up to the loft and was watching us down in the living room and listening and watching all this. And her husband is a doctor at the VA. He's retired now, but he was working at the VA. So I put him on the table, and I stood at the foot, and I tickled his etheric toes, which were opposite of his real toes, and he could feel it. So I'm like, okay, there's an energy field here. This is what we have to stop this hemorrhage of energy, like an open faucet running on full speed from the stump to the rest of his leg that is now missing. So I brought up a visual of blue light, and I took my hand like a cup and I just put it at the stump, and I kept looking at it, and I could feel and I could see a little bit. I'm not real into the clairvoyance in terms of seeing. I can see if I have to, but I wasn't really seeing. I was more like perceiving and feeling. And so I just capped the stump with the blue light in my hand. And then after 2 or 3 minutes, I took my hand away, And he said the pain was gone. So then I went back down to the foot of the massage table and tickled his etheric feet. And he could feel it, but it wasn't in any pain. And from what I understand, just in that one session, the pain went away completely. But at some point, I think it was about a year later, he slipped on some cement and banged his stump, and I guess undid my cap. And so the pain came back, but he did tapping for it and was able to adjust his energy field with the intention of the tapping and release the pain and the shock of falling. And the pain went away, and then it never came back. So that was really cool.
One amazing story after another. And all of that, all of that case and many, many others are highlighted in your book. And that book, Spiritual Compass, is available on Amazon. And I will have a link to the book in the show notes.
Can we take a minute to look at the iceberg one more time? I just want to make a couple of points. I know we're running low on time. I want to make a couple of points on the iceberg that I didn't get to. We talked about panic attacks, fears, and phobias. Dissociation, in my definition, is when part of us is one dimension away. The clinical definition is not that, but that's the way I see it, and that's the way I work with it. An age of us or a part of us, spirit, soul, consciousness, I don't know what you want to call it, is one dimension away. You're not in present time. The stress, trauma, and the PTSD, more people grow up in a war zone at home and get PTSD from that. We call it complex PTSD, than war. Most people think PTSD is combat soldiers or maybe police officers, and that's certainly a lot of it. But there's an entire population of people whose trauma is under the waterline and have no idea that their childhood is causing physical illness or emotional things, emotional patterns, triggers, and panic and phobias and all of that. So up here at about 11 o'clock is something that's very important. The ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's a landmark study, and it basically proves, I think, the body-mind connection. It's a series of 10 questions that are about childhood trauma. And the result of the study is that if your score is high, so 0 to 10 or 1 to 10, if you're in the, depending on a lot of other things like genetics and resilience and a lot of other mix and match of what makes us resistant to illness or vulnerable to illness, you have a graded relationship, a correlation to a high score in ACE and a life-threatening illness in adulthood. And so that study was started at the center at the Kaiser Hospital here in San Diego in conjunction with the Centers for Disease Control. So the Centers for Disease Control only gets involved in things that are an epidemic. And this was an epidemic of sexual abuse that came to the doctor's awareness when he was working in a weight loss program. So that's how the ACE study began. And I used the 10-question assessment in my intake, and I recommend that all my colleagues, licensed or not, also use it, because it's a very, very pivotal, foundational, important thing for not only how you're going to treat somebody, but for the client to know in their own mind how that trauma is affecting them in their body or mind. So, and that takes us back to somatization, which is where it all started. Emotion and trauma into the body and causing problems.
Okay. The iceberg is an excellent metaphor and something I think we can all keep in mind.
We all have one.
Don't we? Don't we just? Sue, you were willing to share what I think is an excellent resource for helping people identify or how to enhance their own intuition, metaphor language. Can you share a little bit about that resource and how people can get it?
Yeah, the best way for them to get it is to just email me at sue@suehannibal.com, and it's going to be a 5-page list that I'm still occasionally adding to of metaphor language that correlates to the body and the mind. So the example that I use most often, because everybody gets this, they say it, but most people don't correlate it to the physical, is back pain. So the metaphorical issues of back pain would be, are you being stabbed in the back, metaphorically, of course, betrayed, nobody has your back is up against the wall, you want somebody to back off. When I do this in a workshop, invariably the hands go up and they get instantly the correlation between chronic back pain that is not evident on an x-ray, the chiropractor can't stop it, the adjustments won't hold, and nobody knows how to get rid of this back pain because it's either dissociated or it's somaticized, which is in the physical, emotion into the physical. So they realize really quickly, they'll go, oh, it's my mother, or oh, it's my boss. Stabbed in the back, okay, we're on it. And then we do EFT to handle that emotional trigger, and the energy in the back lines up. Could also be heartbreak, because that's the mid-back of your heart, and you might feel like if you were abandoned or betrayed by a lover or a partner, and you feel it in the back, stabbed in the back, there's betrayal. So it can be from the front and to the back. It's a very easy way to let them understand what metaphor language is. And then you go through the 5 pages and you're like, okay, this. It's a very cool tool to learn body-mind language and diagnose yourself. And then use EFT to help heal yourself, or go to someone if you can't do it.
And how do they get that resource again?
They can just email me at the address to my website. It's sue@suehannibal.com. It's spelled HANNIBAL. And I'll send those out.
Excuse me. Excellent. Sue, as we begin to wrap up, are there any last thoughts or anything that you'd like to share before we ring off?
Well, I think what I'd like to share is the difference between spirituality and religion. I was raised Catholic, and in the beginning of the book, I talk about when I was, I think, 8 years old, I took my life in my hands and raised my hand in catechism class and disagreed with a nun when she said that the Catholic Church was the only true church and everyone else was going to hell. And so I said, well, my best friend Cindy is Jewish and my other friend is Protestant, and I'm not going to heaven without them. So that kind of started me on this path of spiritual versus religion. Belief systems and judgment divide us, and spirituality, the way I look at it, is one size fits all. So especially in these politically dangerous times, I would recommend that people look to their spirituality and not judge any of the holy books, any of the traditions. There are a number of people who have come to this planet who have taught about the holy realms. And I don't judge any of them. I don't think one is better than the other. There are many names of God. And so I would like to pitch spirituality in conjunction with whatever your spiritual tradition is that you're comfortable with, but not judging anyone else's.
Excellent insight. And again, Sue's website, SueHannibal.com. And you can Sue can be reached by email, sue@SueHannibal.com. And her book, Spiritual Compass, is available on Amazon. Having personally read it, I encourage you to read it. It is an absolutely excellent resource. Whether or not you're a practitioner or whether you're simply interested in enhancing emotional and physical well-being and health, I highly, highly recommend Sue's book. Sue, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge with us. And as we roll off, I invite those who are watching us on YouTube to give us a like if you've benefited from this video, because that does help us in the algorithm, helps YouTube determine what other people see. And if you would like to subscribe, you certainly can do that as well. We would love to have you as part of the family. So with that, Sue, thank you. Blessings.
Thank you.
And thank you to all who are listening, watching. And this will be available both on YouTube and as a podcast. So please reach out to Sue. She's an absolute marvelous practitioner, and I know that you will benefit from your conversations and your work with her. So with that, blessings to all of you who are listening, and blessings to you, Sue, and to your loved ones.
Thank you, Steve.